It all begins in September in training camp. You skate, endure drills, work, and hope. Hope that you will make the cut, or hope that you score 40 goals, or hope that you can endure one more season without destroying a weathered body. And some hope to reach the playoffs. But an elite few can entertain visions of holding the coveted Stanley Cup overhead. For the Detroit Red Wings, few spoke of the playoffs after a dismal 85-86 season, when the Wings had the worst record in the league. But one man knew it could be done. He knew it was just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. The story of the 1986-87 Detroit Red Wings. As one of the 6 original teams, the Red Wings flaunted a rich tradition that made them a feared force in the NHL. Part of that tradition exists as a result of the years when the Wings boasted the greatest player to ever strap on the blades.
The puck comes back to Rival. It's knocked down by Del Vecchio, and Howe is in the right place at the right time to score Detroit's second goal.
The Wings have won 7 Stanley Cups, the last one in 1955. The last 2 decades have been frustrating for Red Wing fans, and not until new owner Mike Ilitch took over the franchise did a feeling of confidence return. In just 5 years, he, with the guidance of general manager Jim Devellano, has created a contending club. In need of a coach before the season began, there was one man Ilitch and Devellano wanted.
Welcome aboard, Jacques Demers.
I'm not going to make any promises. I don't have to sell myself as a coach. I know one thing, we're going to play better hockey than we did in the past.
I've always liked to be around very positive people. I like being around enthusiastic people. And I knew he had a lot of spirit, and I watched him coach. And I had heard Jim Devellano mention that Rod Caron and Jacques Demers were a couple of class individuals. And they were good people, and they accomplished a lot with not a whole lot to work with there in St. Louis.
He has a work ethic, and this is how Mike and I achieved our success with the work ethic. He's a family. He looks at his own family and the hockey family as we do. He's a family man. And I don't know if I'm as hyper as Jock, but he just appeals to us. He gets the most out of his people. He's a motivator. And he also makes it look like he's having a lot of fun, and that's important.
Demers immediately installed a new system in Detroit, and the overhaul was based on old principles of discipline and defense. Those who had the notion that maybe Demers wasn't for real quickly found themselves in the minors, and that included the league's #1 draft choice.
Well, first of all, there's nobody, including myself, more important than the team. The team wins games. Individuals are obviously important to us, but it's a team concept, and everybody has to work together. We win games together, we lose games together. When things go bad, everybody goes bad, and when things go well, everybody is enjoying it. And I think that's a very important thing that's happening in Detroit, and the future is bright because we have a teamwork here.
Stand by, camera 3 and music in 3, 2, 1.
So the scene was set. The Motown Messiah was here, and the season opener, televised from Quebec, was underway. Viewers at home were hungry for the taste of victory. But wait a minute. The Nordiques were manhandling the Wings, and the final score was the wrong end of 6-1. Some thought that it was reminiscent of seasons before, but most knew it was just a matter of time.
We knew we had a good team, and we were positive going into the game, and with the loss, we just figured, hey, we're going back home. We're going to have all the fans there. We just got to get back and win the next game.
2 days later, the wounds were healed, and the home opener had the Wings facing off against the roughhouse Chicago Blackhawks. The vision from Quebec faded from memory, and the fans were out in full force to embrace Jacques Demers. Nervous energy filled the arena as the Wings, actually goalie Greg Steffen, got off to a shaky start. 2 quick goals from the Blackhawks put the Wings in a hole. A bold move from Demers found the premier goaltender on the bench in favor of backup Glenn Hanlon. And an inspired club skated to a thrilling 4-3 victory, and a sellout crowd left Joe Louis rewarded.
We let them know we're not going to accept this, Greg. We do believe you're a good goaltender, but you got to go out and play well for us, because I, as a coach, believe that you're one of the top goaltenders in the league. Immediately at that time, we let Greg Steffen know that he's going to have to prepare himself mentally for every game. He's going to have to be sharp, and if he plays up to his capabilities, we know we're going to win, and we know we're going to have a good season.
In the end, it was the right play. The first game in Quebec, I started off all right, then we lost 6-2, but it was the type of thing where I was disappointed because it was the first game at home, and there was a lot expected from me, and it was the right play, a right move by the coach, but it was a little disappointing for myself, and it carried over for the next few games because I did lose my confidence.
The intuitive Demers quickly realized who should wear the C, and surprised many by naming 21-year-old Steve Yzerman as his captain, making him the youngest captain in Red Wing history. Yzerman had struggled through the previous season that abruptly ended in January with a broken collarbone. He decided during his recuperation that he needed to build a stronger body and work diligently to increase his strength. That helped his confidence, and he responded brilliantly to the responsibility of leadership.
Well, I was pretty excited about being named the captain. We had a lot of new players coming in, and I was looking forward to the challenge. And being my fourth year here, it was about time, or the time come that I had to establish myself as an important member of the team. If anything, it forced me to play harder, and it helped me out. It forced me to step forward more and take charge of situations on the ice or whatnot. And I think it's helped me become a better hockey player.
Back out to the point. Wilson knocked away by Barr. Here comes Yzerman. He may get away from Doug Wilson. Yzerman in alone for the shot. Oh, they score.
He beat Sauvé right up over the trapper on a breakaway.
And now it comes free and front. Shot, and they score. Yzerman on the power play, and it makes it 4-3 in the wing. Right back in it.
Now here's Yzerman. Good play to get away from Bello. Skates it quickly up into the North Star zone. Yzerman, quick shot, he scores!
Steve Yzerman became a scoring threat every shift and was feared by other teams. His work ethic and consistency made him a bona fide NHL star and a shining example to the younger players. One of those players who learned from example was another of Jim Devellano's first-round draft choices, Sean Burr. You don't always see his name on the stat sheet, as much as the lack of stats from opposing all-star players. Burr epitomized Demir's philosophy of defense, twice keeping Dennis Savard not only scoreless, but shotless.
You know, when I first came here, I really came as a goal scorer, and I never really expected to be in a checking role. And then Jacques told me at the beginning of the year that they'd like me to check the top centers on the other team, so I sort of adapted the role and, taken it pretty seriously, and would like to maybe, the rest of my career sort of be a defensive forward and check players, and doesn't really have as much glamour to it, but it's exciting in its own way, and it's sort of a challenge.
Demers called Burr his most important player early in the season and was many people's choice for the all-rookie team by season's end. The forwards were developing nicely to Demers' tight-checking style, and on the blue line, dramatic improvements were made that would result in a reduction of goals against by 100 midway through the season. Demers knew he needed leaders on defense. Mike O'Connell, who arrived from Boston, fit the mold of a Demers defenseman. The experience of Dave Lewis, who recorded his 1,000th game in the NHL, was of immeasurable help to the younger players. Darren Veach, a sound defenseman, developed his scoring touch, and veteran Harold Snepps protected the zone in intimidating fashion. But back in goal, Demers had a problem. Greg Steffen's play was pivotal to the success of the Red Wings, and he was in turmoil. First, fighting the puck and indecision. Then injuries took over. Trade rumors began to intensify his lack of confidence, so Demers held on to 3 goaltenders, all the while knowing that it was just a matter of time. In the meantime, Glenn Hanlon was flourishing in the nets with help from rookie Sam St. Laurent, but Demers waited until the time was right before returning St. Laurent to Adirondack. And Steffen was back.
Former Red Wing across the line, winds up, takes the shot, glove save, Steffen.
I really worked hard. I think it was my work ethic in practice. Maybe I wasn't doing what I should have been doing in practice, so I really concentrated for about a week, and I told Jacques I'll be ready when he tells me to go next. And what happened is I got back-to-back wins in our division, so it was that was a big boost for myself because I started to get my confidence back, and the guys started believing in myself. So it was a big turnaround. I think my work ethic in practice really got better, and that was a big help also.
For Demers, the return to St. Louis had emotional overtones.
3 years here, a good rapport with the fans, a lot of calls today. The most important call came from Mr. Illich, who wished me good luck. He showed a lot of class and kind of settled me down.
And his newly refurbished machine was primed for the race, winning this one for Demers. The Wings knew that they were on the right track when they left the famed Montreal Forum with a 4-3 win over the Stanley Cup champion Canadiens.
For us to be successful this year, we had to win on the road. And going into Montreal, and a place with great tradition, and you skate in there and you see all the flags, all the Stanley Cup flags and everything, you'd be a little intimidated. So I realized that if we go in there and we play a strong effort and get good goaltending and come out with a win, it'll build something good for this team and give us the confidence to go into other buildings and perform the same way. And we went in there, we got good goaltending, tight checking, got some timely goals, and we pulled a 4-3 victory out. And it was a big boost and enabled us to, I think, win more games on the road than we expected.
It wasn't difficult for the fans to get used to that feeling of victory after only a month of play. The club was above 500, and somehow the feeling that the boys in red would pull it through sparked the masses. Renewed spirit made a seat in Joe Louis a prized possession. By the end of November, the Wings were playing to standing room only crowds who knew even when the home team fell behind, it was just a matter of time.
Oh, there's a steal by Klima. The shot, he scored!
It's turning the whole city's around. I think it's important for this city too. There's not much that we've had to cheer about in Detroit for the last few years, and he's really given us something to be thankful for.
I think this is the best season the Red Wings have ever had. I mean, it's great.
They're great. They're number one.
The people, the fans, the enthusiasm. It's hard to put into words. It's just the feeling is so much different from last year. It was like wow, This year it's just like wow.
This year I've got people on a waiting list to get tickets I can't go to games at. It's just been a good year from last to first. Jacques done a great job.
I think they're doing a fabulous job. It's brought so much excitement to Detroit. Jacques Demers is a key man.
You got to read that now. He's got the puck in the corner. Don't go to the corner. Go right to the boards. Because all they're doing is shooting it around the boards. Read that. It's just a matter of time, boys. Let's go. Hurry. Too many men. There are too many men. What do you mean? They're carrying the puck. What are you talking about?
The sensationally talented Peter Klima began the season with a goal-a-game pace, with moves like this.
Between the circles, trying to get a shot away. Gets back up, he shoots, he scores!
Look at Klima. What an effort. Not second, but third. Peter Klima just turning the Penguins inside out.
But there was difficulty fitting in with the defensive style of Demers' revived club. The coach was patient with Klima, keeping him on the ice when the Wings needed a goal. And at mid-season, he began to respond, registering a hat trick and an overtime win in Boston. Demers had his club playing an astounding defensive game, and the fans at Joe Louis were in love. Instead of scoring 6 goals and losing 8-6, his reshaped Wings were recording scores of 2-1 and 4-3, most of those scores appearing in the win column. But the real winners were those diligent Detroiters who had been there for so long. setting new attendance records every game for the club and the NHL. They had him standing in the aisles. With the success this club enjoyed and the life it was bringing to the city of Detroit, the Wings paused a moment just before Christmas to honor one former hero, the anchor of the most famous line to wear the red and white. He skated between Gordie Howe and Ted Lindsay to form the production line. Mike and Marian Ilitch gave him an evening so the fans could remember and say thanks to a great gentleman, Sid Abel.
This is the greatest hockey town in America. You are the greatest fans.
By Christmas, the Red Wings were tied for third place, but victories over the holiday week vaulted them to first place. After a tie in Toronto, the Wings came home for the traditional New Year's Eve game against the Stanley Cup runners-up, Calgary Flames. Fans were attired in fashions ranging from blue jeans to tuxedos to witness a comeback from a 3-goal deficit to a 6-4 dousing. Another record-breaking crowd. Back-to-back victories over Minnesota, home and away in January, increased the grip on first place. But a loss to Toronto began a 6-game winless slide. The 6th game was a loss to the Maple Leafs, and the Red Wings found a nemesis resting in front of the Toronto net, Alan Bester. Standings meant nothing in this matchup. Toronto, at the bottom of the division, still had repeated success against the Wings.
It's just like there was a brick wall in front of the net. We couldn't score. A lot of the games we have played Toronto, and they still come up beating us 3-1, 2-0, whatever it was. But he just, he won a lot of those games single-handedly.
The competition extended beyond the ice surface to the two men behind the bench who have long been adversaries, dating back to the minors. John Brophy exchanged barbs in the papers and gestures in the games with Demers.
I know John, and I know he's a competitor. I know he'll try anything to win, possibly thinking, as was said, that they were getting me upset. They never got me upset. Once the game has started, I'm coaching my game, and they're coaching their game. The biggest disappointment was the choke sign, and I've never had an opportunity to work for classy people like the Ilitches, and I wasn't going to lower the team by responding to that. It hurt me inside. I could have acted stupidly because, when you get to the point where you lose 6-0 and someone gives you a choke sign, that hurts. But John's a competitor, and I would like to think it was just a mishappening of his part. I don't think he meant it. I hope so, and as far as I'm concerned, I would never do that.
With the season just half over and obvious success in full view, the Wings made a trade with Quebec that was expected to help both clubs, John Ogrodnik, Basil McRae, and Doug Shedden, for Brent Ashton, Jobert Delorme, and Mark Kumpel.
The acquisition of Brent Ashton certainly gave us a better two-way hockey player. Jock was looking for a good two-way player. Brent Ashton is that kind of a player. John was struggling with us. He was having a tough time scoring, and we thought maybe that kind of a change would do him some good, and so we made the trade.
It was a shock, you're in the dressing room taking your equipment off, and you get told, and at first, the feelings are, well, the team doesn't want me, but as you hear later, and the way they put across me that I was going to a team that really wanted me to be a part of the team.
By February, the Wings had put together 5 wins in 9 games to set up a showdown for first place with Minnesota. With the North Stars in first, the Wings could grab the top spot by winning a home-and-home series. The importance of the game showed up on the ice when intensity levels sparked tempers, but the Red Wings prevailed 6-4 and set up the battle for first in Minnesota.
Gallant sends it back behind Beaupre. Here's Oates in front. He scores!
Oh boy, Davy Barr.
That was Barr, rather, not Oates. You're right.
The Wings beat the North Stars to knock them out of first place and took over the top spot in the North Division, a position they would keep for 2 months. The Wings had great success with home and home games, winning most of those crucial 4-point weekends, which meant the team was in good physical shape thanks to the training regimen of fitness coach Don McAdam. In February, the Wings were undefeated at home and in first place. The last time that happened, LBJ was president, Sid Abel was coach of the Red Wings, and Steve Yzerman wasn't born. As the season developed, other clubs began to realize the Red Wings were for real and no longer took them for granted. They also found that the Wings would not be intimidated by anyone. Demers had put together a big, aggressive team. with defense as the #1 priority. And everyone soon learned the Red Wings were not a team to mess with.
Immediately off come the gloves with these two.
Just an elbow that Secord protected himself and gave Delorme. Now Barr and Presley with the sticks up. They're going to go. They're going to fight and go. Barr's very slow as he giving it to him.
Demers blended that defense with players who had the scoring touch, and the media recognized what was happening in Detroit. As Steve Yzerman and Gerard Gallant adorned the cover of Hockey News, and later Yzerman shared another cover with Darren Veach. The Wings never fell out of first place in March, but there were unbelievable moments, like this game-winning goal by Pat LaFontaine with 4 seconds left in the Joe Louis Arena clock. Most importantly were the times like this, when the Wings withstood the challenge of Norris Division clubs like Chicago with incredible defense. Goalie Greg Steffen stoned the Blackhawks to record his first shutout of the season. Then on March 28th, the Wings did something they haven't done in 16 years. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers in the Spectrum, 5-1. Goalie Glenn Hanlon was magnificent, and Jacques Demers called the play of the team near perfect, awarding the game puck to the happiest man in the crowd, Mike Ilitch. But the other Norris Division teams remained within striking distance. The division race was so close all season, there was never time to relax. Entering the final weekend of the season, no playoff spot was guaranteed, and it came down to the final 2 games to determine the playoff pairings for all 5 Norris teams. The Red Wings were considered a cinch for first place, and Toronto, not even a factor a week earlier, was making a late charge, beating the likes of Edmonton and Winnipeg. All Detroit needed to lock up first place was 1 point against Pittsburgh Saturday night.
Here's the shot, he score! It comes to Beach, quickly across. Norwood takes the shot. Knocked down in front. Where is it? They score! Dave Barr!
It looked like the Wings were going to do it easily with a 3-1 lead. But the Penguins came back to tie the score and send the game into overtime. Still, all the Wings had to do was survive overtime, get the point, and head for the champagne iced down in the locker room. A minute 26 seconds into the extra period, Mario Lemieux picked up the puck and broke in alone on Glenn Hanlon to postpone the celebration. That set up a showdown at Joe Louis Arena against the second-place Blues, and the fans came out in record numbers to see the battle for first.
Right now you're looking at the hottest ticket in town, Detroit-St. Louis.
It was winner take all, and again Detroit needed only a point to lay claim to the division championship. As if it were a screenplay, the end of regulation found the score knotted at 3, but this is the only way the Wings knew how to play. Nothing came easy, and it was fitting that they had to fight and claw for 1 more period to claim first place. As the overtime began, everyone in the arena could feel the pressure. Then, with just over 1 minute left in the season, the second-place Blues became the first-place Blues, as Rob Ramage fired the puck past Greg Steffen to end the Wings' 2-month reign in first place. The failure to win in 2 overtime games and then slipping out of the top spot for the first time since February 7th could have had a devastating effect on the team's attitude for the playoffs.
They were ready to celebrate, and I could just see it, and I said, oh no, don't think that we let you down. It was going to happen. We tried to win it. We didn't choke. That was one word that came to mind. We're not quitters. We're not losers. We're going to come back and have great playoffs, and you'll forgive us for not winning the division. And that's the first thought that came to mind. I hope Mr. and Mrs. Ilitch realize that we didn't let them down, because I've never seen yet in 15 years of pro where coaches, players have such an affection for an owner as we have for him, because I believe it all boils down, he treats his people fair and straight. What else can you ask for? I said, this is not a failure season, this is a great season. I said, we're going to have great playoffs. I was in the Final Four last year, and I knew to get out of our division what it would take. Beating Chicago, we felt comfortable with, but we had to overcome, that first series. And then once we've done that, I was saying to myself, gee, what the heck could happen? You never know, because once you go by the first round, your momentum, your confidence, your attitude, everything seems to change. Your self-esteem, I believe in that very much, and your confidence, it means a lot to athletes. And once they get that going for them, So once the first series was over with, you say, gee, we could really go where nobody really expect us to go.
When the smoke settled, the Wings found themselves matched with the Blackhawks in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. They retained home ice advantage, and as expected, the fans jammed the arena. Game 1 was just what everyone anticipated. Both teams came out pounding. The Wings drew first blood as Peter Klima did what he does best. He got in behind the defense, put a few moves on goaltender Bob Sauvé, and deposited the puck in his net. Then Darren Veach showed his offensive prowess and drove a shot from near the blue line past Sauvé. The Hawks weren't going down easily as Bob Murray scored on Stefan to spoil his hopes for a shutout. Sean Burr put in an insurance goal, and Game 1 went in the books as the first playoff victory ever for the Red Wings in Joe Louis Arena. In Game 2, the Blackhawks knew they had to be physical if they had any chance of winning in Joe Louis Arena. But the Wings came out flying. Just 37 seconds into the first period, Gerard Gallant went streaking down the right side and victimized Bob Sauvé to set the tone early for this game, and it was music to the ears of Jacques Demers. Game 2 was near perfect, said the coach. Every aspect was well played, from the power play to penalty killing. When Chicago had a man advantage, they could barely get the puck into the Wings zone. The goaltending was brilliant. Again, Stefan flirted with a shutout, allowing just one tally. And the offense. Game 2 was history, and Demers had a comfortable 2-game lead. But this is what no one wanted to talk about. The place where David had slain many Goliaths. The dreaded Chicago Stadium. The fans in this stadium are the most vocal in the league, and playing here does indeed give the Blackhawks an advantage on home ice. When the game started and the butterflies settled down, Bob Pulford's Hawks came out banging, but the Wings muscled right back. Again, Detroit got the first score from Steve Yzerman, and guess who was there to cheer the visitors? The Detroiters who traveled to Chicago were not intimidated by the mystique of the fabled stadium. Mel Bridgman gave them 2 more opportunities to cheer in the first period, and the Wings began to smell another victory. The Blackhawks were not about to give up, especially in Chicago, and they fought back to a tie.
This, without a doubt, is the most exciting time in professional hockey. Playoff time, and especially overtime. One shot is all it takes to send everybody home.
Overtime is not what Jacques Demers wanted, especially when faced with the knowledge that the Wings hadn't won in Chicago all season. Each team had chances in the sudden death period, and Dennis Savard almost won it, but Glenn Hanlon saved it for Detroit. Then it happened. A shot from the blue line and the puck bounces in off a glove, and the owner of that glove leads the victory dance. Jacques Demers had a 3-game lead in the series, and had some revenge for the humiliating defeat Chicago handed the Wings 2 seasons before his arrival. Game 4 became do or die for the Blackhawks. It's nearly impossible to win 2 in a row in Chicago Stadium, but the Red Wings were clearly the superior team, and even the fans sensed the inevitable. Greg Stefan, back in goal again, allowed only 1 goal and was voted the game's #1 star. The Wings supported him with goals from Ashton, Bridgman, and Barr. The Red Wings had swept the Blackhawks in 4 games, making this the first playoff series the Wings won since 1978, when hockey was still played in Atlanta, and the Wings eliminated the Flames. It was quiet at Joe Louis Arena. The Wings had dispatched the Hawks so quickly that they had to wait 9 days for the winner of the other Norris Division matchup between Toronto and St. Louis. Demers gave everyone 3 days off as he wondered who his next opponent would be. The better team finally surfaced to resurrect a rivalry that dates back to the beginnings of the league. The Detroit Red Wings would meet the Toronto Maple Leafs in postseason play for the first time in 23 years. These 2 big, aggressive teams featured 4 of the toughest guys in the NHL. Even the coaches didn't like each other. It was a throwback to the old days, and everyone expected fireworks. Round 2 of the playoffs had the Wings with home ice advantage again. The game started tentatively, much like a chess match, with each waiting for the other to make the first move. Both goaltenders came up with major league saves, and it quickly became a physical game with bodies flying in front of both nets. Toronto finally did the first damage when Dan Davey scored. Mel Bridgman answered with a goal moments later, and Mike O'Connell fooled Ken Reggett with a long shot instead of dumping the puck into the corner. After the intermission, Greg Steffen let down as Rick Vide. Then Wendell Clark. Then Todd Gill earned it, and Jacques Demers had seen enough. He pulled Steffen in favor of Glenn Hanlon, and nobody in the arena felt worse than Steffen. Hanlon kept the Leafs off the board, but the Wings' offense couldn't come through with another one, despite some great opportunities. Ken Reggett had taken over where Alan Bester left off as the Leafs took Game 1 at Joe Louis Arena. When Game 2 opened, the Wings immediately showed the Leafs it was going to be physical, but Toronto was ready for that strategy, and Detroit ended up on the penalty clock more often than Toronto. The goaltending at the Toronto end made the difference in this game. Ken Reggett stopped everything the Wings could fire at him until Darren Veach scored, but by then it was 3-1. Greg Steffen would allow 4 more goals to make the final score 7-2. The Wings were embarrassed at home twice, and the fans didn't like it. When the Wings arrived in Toronto for Game 3, they found blue and white brooms being sold, and people were talking about a 4-game sweep. Even the celebrities in the audience were rooting for the Leafs. When they opened the scoring, it looked like broom sales were going to be brisk. But finally, the Wings got organized and remembered the basics that the coach preached in training camp. Their passing was sharp, their checking was heavy. Their discipline frustrated the Leafs right into the penalty box, and Glenn Hanlon stopped 22 shots. Those breaks that were going the way of the Leafs in Detroit were now going the Wings' way in Toronto. When Sean Burr scored his 5th playoff goal, it was John Brophy's turn to pull his star goalie and try to fire up his team. He called on Alan Bester, hoping the Wings would be reminded that he had beaten them every game he started during the regular season. But the Wings were not intimidated by their old nemesis, and it looked like there was no advantage on home ice as the Wings won it in Toronto 4-2. 2 nights later, as the Wings waited to take the ice for Game 4, they felt confident because finally they had overcome the Maple Leaf goaltending. John Brophy decided to come back with Reggett instead of Bester. For the Red Wings, Glenn Hanlon was back in goal and ready. Both teams flexed their muscle right from the opening gun, with crushing checks, and it continued throughout the entire game. The goaltending at both ends was superb.
Oh, what a save on Yzerman by Ken Reggett.
Each netminder stopped shots that could easily have been scores.
Held in by Lands, one times it, deflected wide, in a check, stopped by Hanlon at the side of the net, out in front, Hanlon another save. And Norwood clears the puck to Sean Burr. Tremendous goaltending by Glenn Hanlon in the first period.
The first 20 minutes ended the way it began, without a goal. But some great hockey was played, and it was like old-time hockey. In the second period, the Wings did something they failed to do in the first 3 games. Score the first goal on this Mel Bridgman deflection. Glenn Hanlon continued his brilliant game until Wendell Clark finally evened the score, and Maple Leaf Garden erupted. The second period ended as the first, in a tie. This time 1-1. In the third period, Gerard Gallant was quick to recapture the lead to quiet the Toronto fans. Now the pressure was really on both goaltenders. It stayed quiet until Wendell Clark scored again to ignite the crowd, and Leaf owner Harold Ballard was elated. The third period ended with the score now knotted at 2 as the teams left for a 15-minute intermission. As Red Wing owner Mike Ilitch awaited the sudden death overtime, he knew how important the next few minutes were to the entire season, and so did the coach. They had just watched a sensational game, and now had to sweat out the result of an extra period. Either they tie the series, or go down 3 games to 1. The difference in the 2 situations meant life or death to this club. The overtime began as the third period ended with exciting, well-played hockey. Both teams had excellent chances to end it, only to be thwarted by outstanding goaltending. The drama of the moment is captured in the voice of play-by-play announcer Dave Strader.
Out in front, Yzerman. Oh, what a save by Reagan.
One goal would end it, but everyone wondered now if it would ever happen.
Now it comes back up the boards. Golan in 5 will battle. It comes to Lands. A save. Oh! Went wide of an open net. Doesn't get any better than this. As Barr lifts it back inside the Toronto line. This is great hockey.
Then, at 9 minutes 31 seconds, it happened. This time, to the Red Wings.
Free, picked up by Inachek. They score! They score! Inachek on a wraparound.
Now it was back to Detroit with the improbable task of winning 3 games in a row. But they knew they could beat Toronto, and they were not about to be embarrassed in front of the home crowd again. This was not the same Red Wing team that was booed here the week before. This was the team the fans had loved all season. They remembered how to play defense at home. This night, Detroit would light the scoreboard first, as Lee Norwood rifled a shot under a leaping Mel Bridgman for his first playoff goal. And there were no boos in Joe Louis Arena. The defense shut down the Maple Leafs for the rest of period 1. Early in the second, Adam Oates scored on a good second effort to make it a 2-0 lead. Then Glenn Hanlon took over, stopping all 17 shots the Leafs threw at him. In the third period, the Wings dominated the Leafs and closed the door on all scoring attempts with solid defense and goaltending. The goal per period pace continued with Brent Ashton's goal in the third. The Wings completely controlled the game, and the fans got into the spirit and began to look forward to Friday and Game 6. Glenn Hanlon recorded a playoff shutout, his first as a Red Wing and the second of his career. The Wings were very much alive, setting up a return to Maple Leaf Garden as John Brophy began to worry. The pressure was squarely on the Leafs to win it because there was no way Brophy wanted to return to Detroit for a 7th game. As the two teams traveled back to Toronto, the Red Wings felt a growing confidence while the Maple Leafs began to show tension. They began to wonder if they could ever crack Glenn Hanlon. Coach Jacques Demers shut down the Maple Leafs' best player by putting Joe Kocur on the ice to shadow his cousin, Wendell Clark. When Clark did manage to get free, Hanlon closed the door, and the defense was always there to help out. Again, the Wings got the first goal, and the tension grew for the Leafs. But you can't keep a player as talented as Clark off the scoreboard forever, as he gave the Toronto fans a reason for hope. In the second period, Vincent Danfus scored the Leafs' go-ahead goal, and the fans began to finally relax and think about eliminating the Red Wings. But that didn't last long. 2 minutes later, Brent Ashton worked to set up Adam Oates for the tying goal, and you could feel the tension in Maple Leaf Garden. Many felt the next goal would win it, and it wasn't until the third period was half over before Bob Probert deposited what would eventually be the winning goal. The Leafs had some great chances, but Glenn Hanlon wouldn't bend. John Brophy pulled his goalie at the end of the game to try and tie it up, but even that didn't work.
Burr chasing after it. Burr the empty net. He scores! Game 7 Sunday night.
The Wings had tied the series to send it back to Motown, the very thing that John Brophy dreaded. Game 7 in Joe Louis Arena. The Red Wings arrived back home to a media blitz. The team was the talk of the town, making more headlines than the Pistons and the Tigers. They had captured the hearts of Detroiters. It was now a one-game series, do or die for both clubs, and momentum was on the side of the Wings. Thousands of screaming fans agreed, and the feeling in the arena was indescribable. After all the interviews and hoopla died down and the puck was dropped, Wendell Clark again found his cousin Joe Kocur a very close companion. It was a physical game as the entire series had been. Detroit was on the scoreboard in the first period when Adam Oates quickly jammed it in the net. The Detroit defense was sound, keeping the puck out of their own zone for most of the game. When it did invade home territory, Glenn Hanlon was magnificent, answering every shot on goal the Leafs could muster in the second period. The Detroit audience loved it and spent most of the period on their feet, screaming and cheering, especially when Steve Yzerman scored. They knew how important this game was, and they appreciated just how well their boys were playing. The Wings and the crowd could sense a victory. Glenn Hanlon continued his brilliant goaltending, and when Darren Veach scored goal number 3, it was obvious the Wings were going to be the victors in this tiring series. With 2 minutes left in the game, everyone was on their feet, and the noise was deafening.
I was honestly thinking that they could score 3 goals in 2 minutes. So it must have been about, maybe about 30 seconds left, and I started to realize things, and I was saying to myself, okay, you've been calm, the whole thing. You've got another series coming out with Edmonton. Let's not get too excited. And I just started, then finally, after about 2 minutes on the ice, I just couldn't hold it anymore.
Chuck again, trying to get loose. Therrien, a shot. It went wide. Well, I'll tell you. 5 seconds.
The Wings fell back to protect Hanlon's shutout, and when the buzzer sounded, he had held Toronto scoreless for the second time in this series.
It is over. Jacques Demers hugging John Brophy, and the Red Wings have won the North Division title. I'll tell you, Al Michaels said it, broadcasting the game, the 1980 Olympics, with the U.S. Olympic team beating the Russians, and it is applicable here when you think where this team was a year ago. Do you believe in miracles? You have to say yes. The Wings have done it here, 3-0.
The Wings had lost their first 2 at home and were down 3 games to 1 in the series, and against all odds, came back to win 3 in a row. Only the 4th team in NHL history to accomplish that task, and everyone appreciated the achievement. If the Red Wings thought they'd had it tough so far, they had just won the right to play the best team in the league, featuring the best player in the league. There were now only 4 teams still playing hockey in the NHL, an elite group consisting of Philadelphia, Montreal, Edmonton, and Detroit. After the brief celebration, they boarded a plane that night and began to realize just how difficult their task would be when they arrived in Alberta, Canada, home of the Edmonton Oilers. The Wings' defense would be put to the supreme test against Wayne Gretzky and the rest of the very talented Oilers. They woke the next morning to read the unanimous opinion of the Edmonton media that the Red Wings had no business in their province, let alone on the same ice with the likes of Messier, Curry, Coffey, and the Great One. They were not only talking sweep, they were laughing at the Norris Division champions. Well, that's just the kind of commentary that will get this bunch fired up. Meanwhile, Jacques Demers had another problem. Who to put in front of his net? Glenn Hanlon, who was red hot, or Greg Stephan, who had been unhappy about not playing against Toronto? He surprised many by announcing that Stephan would be his starter. It turned out to be the right decision, something for which Demers was becoming famous. Stephan was aching to redeem himself after 2 poor performances against the Leafs, and Demers sensed it. The Wings' man-on-man defense slowed down the high-flying Oilers, and Stephan came up with big saves, even on the Great One, frustrating him. The Wings captain scored first, and it was pretty quiet in Northland's Coliseum. Kent Nilsson answered with a goal to tie it up and gave the confident Oiler fans a reason to cheer. Moments later, Detroit went ahead on this goal by Joe Kocur, and the period ended in surprise fashion, with Detroit leading 2-1. In the second period, Detroit showed its muscle as the Bruise brothers, Probert and Kocur, found Edmonton's heavyweights to show them they were not going to be intimidated, even though they were the underdog. There was no scoring in the second period as the Wings continued to preserve the lead, but this wasn't supposed to be happening. The third period was more of the same as Detroit continued to control the neutral zone and take Edmonton out of its game. Finally, a goal was scored, but it was a Red Wing goal again. Steve Yzerman worked the puck around to set up Gerard Gallant to make the score 3-1. Suddenly, the Edmonton Riders weren't laughing, and the good, solid, balanced hockey of the Red Wings had immediately made their predictions of a sweep look foolish. The Wings had also managed to score on the best goalie in the league. It was Detroit 3, and the best team in the league 1. The Red Wings were the only ones not surprised at how well they were playing. As they waited to take the ice for Game 2, they pondered the complaints of Glenn Sather that Gretzky was roughed up in the first game, and the Oilers would be coming after Yzerman in this game. Still, the Wings would not be intimidated. Stefan was back in goal after the win 2 nights earlier, but before the first period was half over, Mark Messier put one past him. When Dave Barr injured his knee, it sent a chill through the coach. He could ill afford to lose him because he already had 2 key players watching from the stands. Harold Snepps, a force on the blue line, was out with a separated shoulder, and Darren Veach, so effective on the power play, had torn ligaments in his knee. Grant Fuhrer was back for Edmonton, and this time ready for the Wings' best. Stefan kept it close with saves like this. But Wayne Gretzky broke out with the puck when the Oilers were short-handed to set up line mate Jari Kurri all alone on Stefan for a score. In the second period, Joe Kocur and Marty McSorley found each other for their inevitable confrontation. Finally, late in the second period, Bob Probert jammed up the front of the net to tap in a rebound, and the Oilers knew by now there would be no blowouts in this series. In the third, the Wings killed off the Oilers' power plays, and it was anyone's game until Mark Messier scored with 1:30 left in the game. Edmonton won, but they knew they were in for a battle, and Game 1 was not a fluke. The series was tied, and now they were faced with 2 games in Joe Louis Arena. The Edmonton press raised their ugly head for Game 3, this time in Detroit, when they placed this ad in the Detroit News. The fans were ready to react as the Ostrom sisters made their 7th playoff appearance to thrill the packed arena. Greg Stefan returned to goal, and of course Grant Fuhrer was protecting the net for the Oilers. Adam Oates tested him early, but Fuhrer denied him. The first tally came on a shot from Craig McTavish, and the Oilers took a first-period lead. Each team had great scoring opportunities, but the goaltenders stood tall as Greg Stefan registered saves on Mark Messier and Randy Gregg. Bob Probert even went in the net with the puck, but that was disallowed. Moments later, Steve Yzerman missed on a shot, and Probert picked up the puck and put it past Fuhrer. This one counted, and the fans were elated. With only 36 seconds left in the third, and everyone anticipating overtime, the Wings failed to clear the puck, and Marty McSorley found the gift right in front of Stefan and ripped a shot to win the game. Still, the Wings had held the mighty Oilers to 2 goals, had lost the game on a lucky break, and left the ice confident that they had played well and could just as easily have been the victor. They were matching up with the best team in the league, even without 3 key players. The Wings were inspired, and Glenn Sather said he'd never faced a team with this much heart in the playoffs. When Game 4 got underway, there was only one change. Glenn Hanlon was back. Jacques Demers called him the stopper. Stefan had played well, but Hanlon had stopped losing streaks all season, and this was the most critical call of his career. The story was the same for this game. Solid defense, good checking, and great saves. Late in the first, Dave Hunter was able to penetrate the defense and score on Hanlon. It didn't take long to tie it up, as Sean Burr scored only 22 seconds into the second period. It was even again, and the fans thought Jacques should run the city as well. 2 minutes later, the Wings opened up the scoring as Gerard Gallant gave the home club the lead for the first time. The second period flurry continued, but this time, Edmonton tied it up, courtesy of Glenn Anderson. It stayed even until Mike Kruzhelnitsky put in a goal to take the lead. Rather than freewheeling as the Oilers usually do, Glenn Sather knew the Wings were dangerous and decided to fall back and protect their 1-goal lead. The Wings really took the offensive and played most of the third period in the Oilers' zone with shot after shot rejected. Finally, Demers pulled Hanlon in favor of the extra attacker, and Detroit continued to press, but the Oilers withstood the attack, proving they could take a punch. Again, the difference was only 1 goal, not 8, as the Edmonton writers had predicted. When the 2 teams returned to Edmonton for Game 5, the Wings found themselves in the same dilemma they were in against Toronto, down 3-1. This game opened unlike the other 4, with a flurry of scoring. This time, Detroit was first to light the light on a Gerard Gallant shot. Paul Coffey tied it up to the delight of the Edmonton crowd. But Brent Ashton recaptured the lead on this effort, all in the first period, and it looked like Detroit was on its way. When Gilbert Delorme was hurt, Jacques Demir's heart stopped. He couldn't lose another defenseman from an already depleted blue line. Fortunately, he returned to the game later. Then Steve Yzerman went end-to-end and decided to slap the puck instead of passing, and blew it by Grant Fuhr. It looked like Game 6 was a certainty back in Detroit. Greg Steffen preserved the 2-goal lead with stops like this one, inspiring an argument from Wayne Gretzky, who had been shut out by the Wings and would end up with only 2 assists the entire series. Kevin McClellan finally put one by Steffen to make it a 1-goal lead. Gerard Gallant fired a long shot that caught Grant Fuhr in the neck, and the arena fell silent when he went to the ice. He recovered and stayed in the game. It continued to be physical and tiring for both clubs. Neither team would be intimidated, as Edmonton continued their struggle to gain the tie. Glenn Sather no longer took Jacques Demir's team lightly, and definitely didn't want to return to Detroit for another game. But he needed some offense to prevent the trip. Finally, Marc Messier responded to tie up the score, and the second period ended all even. In the third, Marc Messier again answered the call to register another goal and finally take the lead. The Red Wings wouldn't give up as they had chances late in the third.
Will send it ahead for McTavish. McTavish into the zone. Steffen the save. The Wings just will not die. They will not fold under the pressure of the Oilers.
Then, with Greg Steffen on the bench, he and the entire club watched their season slowly trickle away. That was the end of the 86-87 season for the Cinderella Red Wings. A fabulous time for the team and the city of Detroit. From the worst in the league the previous year to the Final Four this year. And it took the best team in hockey to eliminate them. It was a valiant effort. In the words of Theodore Roosevelt, it's not the critic that counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and often comes up short again and again, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his soul shall never be with those cold and timid ones who know neither victory nor defeat.